Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Well, it's not only time once again for another Curating Your Movie Library segment. Welcome, my sweet, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
And as always, grateful for watching with you. But as this airs, if this airs when I think it will air, it will be October 29th. Even though it'll be October 29th, many of the stores will already, if they don't already, have Christmas stuff out. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to go ahead and talk about Christmas movies. Now, you are the Christmas movie queen.
I love Christmas movies.
We've talked many times on this segment about how you tend to enjoy gentle movies.
Yes.
And you don't get much more gentle movies than the Hallmark Christmas movies.
Type movies. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I don't know if this one that we're talking about was a Hallmark movie, but I do know that the review that I read of it said that it really was a step above others like it. Mm-hmm. But there were some of the standard features of the Hallmark movie. Tell us the name of the movie and the basic gist of the plot, if you would.
The Spirit of Christmas.
The Spirit of Christmas.
Came out in 2015. And you are dealing with a aggressive female attorney trying to climb
imagine
up.
That from the big city.
From the big city, trying to climb up the ladder, and she's never fallen in love. And she gets assigned to a bed and breakfast in Canada to get the estate prepared because it had no heir. Mm-hmm. And what we begin to see is kind of the story from the 1800s of what's happening in that manor before she gets there.
Okay. And who is the love interest?
Well, the love interest that when she gets there, the spirit. Okay, yeah. So she meets the ghost. They keep telling her.
The ghost. What ghost?
The bed and breakfast had a ghost.
Okay.
And she didn't believe in it. She wanted to stay because she needed to get
the thing sold.
Everything in order, and so she sees the newspaper articles on the wall about this fella who was basically murdered in front of the home. So he's there, and for 12 days
every year,
and for 95 years since the death of his
death,
mm-hmm. He has returned back to this bed and breakfast to claim his bed and breakfast.
Right, and he wants her out. He wants her gone.
He wants anybody gone
that's
in that home. Anybody that comes there.
But over time, of course, as you might expect, their relationship begins to
Right. The love that she never had was waiting for him.
Yes.
And so he ends up crossing a chasm and being able to live in that era.
But what's interesting, too, is her perspective. She takes that sort of lawyer aggressiveness and wants to use it to unravel the mystery because he doesn't know A, how he died, or B, why he comes back every year for 12 days.
And she helps him unravel that.
But he has
one
tried.
Of the caregivers there.
Yes. And in doing so, we get introduced to another love interest of his. Mm-hmm. And there's a real question about which way is he going to go. Mm-hmm. And I think how they handled that was really beautifully done.
That he got to choose.
Yes. And
she gave him the choice. The ghost
they both
her.
Did. Yeah.
It's very interesting because all these ghosts show up.
Yes.
From people who, the guy who murdered him, the family member that murdered him. So, I mean, it's just it's not uber compelling, but it is a very gentle, and you liked it.
I did.
Considering some of the ones I've made you sit through, you were like, this is pretty good. Let me look this up.
Yeah, I did. It was, it wasn't a movie I'd write home about, but again, if you're looking for a better version of some of the standard fare for Christmas romances. This one was more interesting, and I think well acted as well. And one of the things I always like it, and this is kind of new to me since maybe we started watching things on Netflix. I really find myself and maybe it's you, but I'm much more interested in period pieces, and even things like how they dress.
Oh, that's so funny,
just capture my attention. And
I'm a big Jane Eyre fan.
Jane
Austen fan.
Yep. So it's called The Spirit of Christmas. That's, of course, play on words. And everything goes well in the end. Everybody lives happily ever after. And we commend it to you. And I'm sure even after October 29th, we will have a few more Christmas movies to talk about. We will talk some about some classics. I know we've done that in the past, so I don't want to rerun. But we'll talk about some more classics that we haven't done. In fact, truth be told, right now in the other room, paused while we record, is The Preacher's Wife, which is, of course, the remake of The Bishop's Wife, starring Whitney Houston, and the uncomparable greatness of Denzel
Washington.
Yes. So if we haven't covered that in the past, we'll cover that in the future. And as always, sweetheart, I appreciate you being with me.
Thank you.
Not just on this show, not just on this segment, but I appreciate you walking it through life with me and walking into the movies with me.
I love you so much.
I love you, darling.
Bye, baby.
It has been my habit from time to time during this election season to devote a segment or to seeking to give some counsel for you as you enter into the voting booth. As you listen, if things go according to how I have them planned, it is 4 days away from our national election here in these United States. And I expect things will be heating up between now and then, and certainly come Tuesday. I have no idea for sure at all who's going to win this election. I'm not sure when we're going to know who has won this election, or in some ways, even if we're going to know who has won this election. I do know that we are sitting on a powder keg. That with COVID, with rhetoric ratcheted up, with a Supreme Court nominee, with violence in our streets, with Black Lives Matter, with Antifa, all of these things are leading us to the brink of significant social breakdown. So how should that impact the way you vote? Well, I'm less concerned about how it impacts for whom you vote. I'm more concerned that it impact you. When this powder keg is about to blow, what the world desperately needs is Christians who are calm, who are peaceful, who refuse to join the screaming crowds. That's my advice. When you go into that voting booth, what I want you to do is I want you, more than anything, to remember that Jesus reigns. I don't know who's going to win the election, but I know who does know. Jesus knows. And the reason Jesus knows is not because he peered down the corridor of time and saw what was going to happen. Jesus knows because Jesus chooses. Scripture tells us that he is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. That not only means that all rulers have a formal, solemn obligation to kiss the Son lest he be angry, to acknowledge his lordship over all things, to bend the knee, but it also means that he controls all things. So much of the drama and the fear is grounded in the idea that the future depends on what happens in this election. Now, don't misunderstand me, friends. I'm not denying that God works through means. I'm not saying that the choices that we make are insignificant. What I am saying is they don't trump what God has determined. I'm saying they don't wrest control of the future out of Jesus' hand. You know what could happen? It could be a rout. And those to my political left could seize power and abuse power and persecute Christians here in the United States. Or the guys on the right side of the aisle, they could win in a rout. And they could do the same thing. Whatever happens is in God's hands. And there are two things that we know about what will happen. One, we know that it will be for our good, because all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And the second thing we know is that God will be glorified. So whatever's going on out in the streets, whatever agitation you may find at the voting station, walk in mindful of the peace that we have that passes understanding. Walk in mindful that we are the brothers and the sisters, not only of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, but we are brothers and sisters of the Prince of Peace. Let our lives be marked by that peace, whatever is going on all around us. And let him be glorified. Walk in peace. Walk out in peace. Go to sleep in peace. And when you wake up in the morning, whether the issue's been settled or not, be in peace. We must stop the turf wars. They call it, in the marketing business, positioning. The goal is to place your product in the mind of the consumer in a particular category. The goal is to have your product carry with it any number of positive associations, and to distinguish your product from all the other competitors. Chevrolet positioned itself once upon a time as a product from the heartland. Buying a Chevy carried with it connotations of patriotism, stability, and tradition. Their jingle sang, "Baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet." Since the church began seeking the wisdom of Madison Avenue, having done so for now several decades, we have seen pretty much the same strategy at work. New churches decide to name themselves River Oaks Worship Center because of what the name evokes in the mind of the consumer. Never mind the absence of a river, the absence of oaks, the lack of worship, and the absence of a center. What matters is positioning. River Oaks Worship Center says everything good, suburban, friendly, upscale without being snooty, ad nauseum. Once we started looking at our neighbors as a market to be won, it wasn't long that we began to see other churches as competitors for market share. Once we adopted a business model for the church, we started looking for strategies to bury the competition. We began to look at our brothers with suspicion, and we gave them cause to suspect us. Cooperation went out the window. The scripture does not, however, describe the church as a business. A bride, yes. A business? No. A body? Yes. A business? No. Indeed, the Apostle Paul, in describing the body that is the church, reminds us of our temptation toward competition. As the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and have all been made to drink into one Spirit. For in fact, the body is not one member, but many. If the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I'm not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I'm not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? If the whole were hearing, where would be the smelling? But now God has set the members, each one of them, in the body just as he pleased. And if they were all one member, where would the body be? But now indeed there are many members, yet one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. No, much rather those members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary. This, of course, does not merely refer to a local congregation. It speaks also of and to the universal church. Our calling, for all our differences, is cooperation. Our calling is love for the brotherhood. Indeed, far better than any evangelistic program, far more potent than any apologetical argument, is the power of our love one for another. Jesus himself told us that by this will all men know that we are his disciples, by our love one for another. No one can argue with this. No one would argue that cooperation in the church is a bad thing. Neither, however, can anyone deny that we are still failing miserably here. we will not get better until we not only remember that we are the body, but that we remember we are His body. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com and join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.